Hello, I'm Gigi Kopelak. Welcome to the program. My guest today is Suzanne Benton. She is an artist who paints, and she does prints, and she does sculpture, and she also performs. And she has traveled all around the world with her art. And I'm so happy to have her here today to tell her story. Welcome, Suzanne.
Thank you, Gigi. It's really nice to be here.
Yeah, I'm so glad. So, you know, the first time I saw you was around 1990, and you were giving a performance with your masks. But you had been working a long time before that.
Absolutely, yeah. My first performance was at Lincoln Center in 1972, and I think that's our first slide.
Right, we have an image of that, yes, yeah.
So there I am performing my first story, which was Sarah and Hagar from Genesis of the Bible. Okay. And the impetus, of course, was feminism.
Right. Yeah, so let's explain it a little bit. You sculpt these masks, you've been welding.
Right, they're welded, right.
They're welded. And then you perform with them, and your main story is about women of the Bible.
No, that was the initial ones.
Oh, that was the initial one.
I started with women of the Bible, and
because this masks we're looking at in the first image is Lilith. And
right, Lilith has the one line in the Bible that God made man and woman out of the dust of the earth, but she's a creature of midrash, of commentary.
Okay.
And was definitely unknown when I told the story. But of course now, even in India, she was not known when I went the first time in the 70s. But when I returned in the 90s, the reporter knew who Lilith was.
Okay, that's interesting.
So that was rather wonderful. Yeah. I started performing with women of the Bible because this was, in essence, my heritage, Judeo-Christian heritage. And it was wanting to point up the patriarchal focus, which had been ignored in a sense. So when I told the story from a woman's point of view, it was a great catalyst for change.
Right. But you were very interested in the women's movement.
Yes.
In fact, you are included in this book.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What is it called?
Feminists Who Changed America. It has a certain date, somewhere in the 60s or the 70s.
Yeah.
Yeah, am, a passionate feminist,
right.
and devoted really years of my life to organizing and talking and then performing. That's actually how I began performing, because I would give these talks and people would ask the same questions, and I felt it wasn't really getting through.
Okay.
But telling a story behind a mask, people don't know what you're going to say, and you can have a lot of commentary and also a lot of expression,
right.
Where you're not going to be screaming in front of an audience when you want to tell them about some terrible thing that happens to women.
So, right. And so that's interesting that you say that people react differently. Do you feel differently when you're behind the mask?
I become whoever that is.
Interesting.
I mean, in a simple way, you can say it's a prop. I mean, if we're going to go, there's the Bengali bride.
Right. Well, let's just tell the story, because the first image that you have is of the woman in India when you were in India.
Right. That was in the 70s. I after working with all kinds of women in America, I decided I wanted to go around the world with this. And my son went to college. Hallelujah. I was divorced. And I took my daughter
son went
with
to college. Hallelujah.
Well, any way you want to put it. And then I have this daughter with whom I get along beautifully, and I took her out of school for a year, and I worked around the world, and I had her keep the expense sheets. She became very, very good at that.
Amazing experience.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Right. So she was 13, and she grew up a lot.
And so you were in India at a workshop?
And we were in India. So I was in India, I think, for 4 months that year, 3 or 4 months. And this was a workshop in Mumbai, then Bombay.
Right.
And the story was given to me, so that my international stories, they aren't stories that I steal. They're stories that are given to me. Okay. That somebody tells the story, and then I therefore have permission. And people are eager to do this, because I didn't go to the country to tell them how to behave. I helped them working with the mass, but in so many of these cultures, they had their own traditions that I learned from. And
But I think this is interesting because this was a mask that you made beforehand.
Right.
But then this woman picked it up and told...
And she told a story of this Bengali bride, which I'm going to tell you when you tell me to do it.
Okay.
And I had been in India for months, and at that time in the 70s, there, you know, in Calcutta, for example, Bangladesh had just recently become a state, and there were homeless people on the street and babies dying on the street, and we had been to Nepal and saw the same. And thankfully, you don't see that anymore, but you did then. And so I stayed with a family in Mumbai for a month with my daughter. They they made a studio for me in their garden, and I'm visiting them on my upcoming trip this winter. Iqbal just said, why don't you stay on the weekend too, so that I can spend more time with you. So when I got there, there was a party for 2-year-olds. And they looked just like the beautiful classical Indians. Right. So I made that mask in honor of this beauty after we had seen babies dying on the street.
Okay.
And then this story, I mean, I'd like to tell it now.
Please do it now. So this is the mask that you have made for the child, and then this woman told the story.
And she told this story.
Okay.
And the thing that I have to tell you is that this woman, who I'm talking about, was still a child.
Okay.
A Bengali bride. It is her wedding day. She's wearing a dress. It's so beautiful. At her wedding, she wears a veil, says nothing. Afterwards, she goes to the home of her husband's parents. She has never seen him before. She has never seen his parents before. They look at her. She looks at them. Takes off the dress and puts it in a box. It will not be worn again until her daughter marries. Then she begins her life with these people as their servant.
That's very interesting.
Bengali bride.
And this young woman told this story.
She told this story.
She put the mask on and told the story.
And you know, this was a very sophisticated woman in Bombay. And when I had been in Delhi, I had mentioned what it was like at some event at the International Center to be witness to the poverty, because that was my first time. It was a huge shock.
Right.
And I was scolded that I had no right to say this. But you know, this is something that obviously all Indians are concerned about.
Right.
And the fact that the woman told me the story gave me permission. But I will say that over the years, there's been more discussion about my right to tell this story.
Oh, that's interesting.
But
I was thinking that when you were wearing it, because here you are a different nationality, and yet you're telling it in a beautiful. But I could feel her through it when you were telling it.
Yeah, it's a much loved story, interestingly enough, and unfortunately, these issues still exist, although maybe not as extremely. And once somebody from Sri Lanka, a man, accused me of not having a right, and I said at that time, the Bengali bride has no voice.
No, that's interesting.
I have a voice.
And you have a voice.
And when she speaks, I'll listen to her. And then I was sent to Bengal on a Fulbright.
On a Fulbright, yes, you got a Fulbright. That's amazing. Let's go a little quickly through the next few ones, because we have there's two masks that. And where were you? This was this.
It's 3 masks actually. It's my daughter on the bottom.
Okay. This is still that same year.
This is Korea. Yes.
Okay,
this was actually I went to Korea before India.
Right.
This was Korea, and they have an incredible mask tradition, and I glean stories, mostly from their folk tales, and also many that I still tell.
Okay, and then the next one is in Africa.
That's in Africa, and the interesting thing in
This
Africa...
the same year?
Yes, this was the 76, 77 year. In Africa, I performed with the Yoruba mask players who had put on a mask performance when the Igbos were being massacred. And not only were the performers masked, but so was the audience, because it was such a political hotbed. And they used masks that I made around the world, and that the Sarah and Hagar mask that I brought with me and told that story around the world.
Right.
So it was very interesting that the characters that they selected for the mask fit, even though, such as, I made the mask of a child, and then of course the Bengali bride might have been 8 or 10 years old.
So they would take the Sarah mask and then tell their own
yes,
story
the Sarah
behind
was
it.
the kingmaker, the king, and in any case.
Right, yeah, that's fascinating.
Yeah.
Fascinating. And then you have this Esther mask?
Right, when I came home from this enormous journey, no one in America was interested in the cultures of the world at that time. This is the 70s. Times have indeed changed.
Yes.
And so I got a commission to do Women of the Bible at a temple in Houston, and I made this Esther mask. It's one of the stories that I tell from that series. And the next, after that, in the early 1982, I went to Germany and did a whole series of masks on the Holocaust. I think I had. It was the day I left was the 50th anniversary of Hitler's rise to power, and the German media was doing what they called a blitz on the Second World War, and included the Holocaust.
It was just perfect timing.
It was amazing. It was totally amazing. I sat in the airport, and the daily news was being read by somebody, and that was the front headline.
Right.
So that I couldn't get away from the subject, because it was in the news the whole time, and my partner at the time was very good at translating.
Yeah.
And so the next images here are Ursula and the survivor.
Okay.
And I decided, I mean, I did that, you know, this was before Shoah, this was before Schindler's List, so that it was an open field for an artist to explore.
Right.
And it was very difficult, naturally.
So when you're there, you're giving a workshop, you're bringing the masks, people are performing with your masks. Are they also making masks, or?
No, not at that point. I made those masks in Germany.
Okay.
Just like I made the mask
so
in
the
India,
picture, is that
in
you
Korea.
that's performing with someone else?
No, this is at Colorado College.
Oh, okay.
And I moved into Greek myth from there. So I think it was the Demeter and Persephone story.
Okay. But I think it's interesting, because you said after you'd done the Holocaust masks.
Right.
Because the others were very intimidating, but you were no longer intimidated by...
Nothing intimidated me. I mean, I thought I was crazy when I came home to take on something so difficult. But on some level, you know, when I was a girl in Queens, the apartment building I lived in had many, many refugees before, during, and after the Second World War. And when my daughter went to college and I was, living without a child, I think a lot of unfinished business was rolling through my head. And it just happened that I was able to go to Germany, and I was offered a show, and I knew that I'd have to do a series on the Holocaust. I couldn't be in the country at that time.
Right.
But I've been there many, many, many times since, and the country is now and not then, and I have worked through a lot of that.
Right. And so, but let's go on, because now the next, where are we?
We're in India again.
We're in India again.
Yeah, this is in Shantiniketan.
And Anarkali is...
Anarkali was a dancing girl who fell in love with the Emperor Akbar's son, who was then Selim before he became emperor. Then he became Jahangir, and it was forbidden, and so they were both sentenced to be buried alive. But of course, Selim was not buried alive, but Anarkali was. And this is a story that was given to me in Shantiniketan. Right after I made the mask, I had no idea But when I was invited to an evening, and I performed with the mask, just sound and body movement, just showing people how you get into a mask, because you enter it. And I made this sound. I'm very good at screams. And this woman came up and told me the story of Anarkali, and it was just
because
totally
she was buried
right.
alive,
She was
and
buried
you had
alive,
made that noise.
and apparently at her burial, she cries out.
Yeah.
Obviously, but she cries out for the man she loves. But I make the sound, and
it's amazing. So there's like a connection that you're
there's
feeling.
connections the whole time. That is what is so incredible.
Yeah.
I mean,
women all over the world, and the stories of women.
A few years later, I was in Pakistan. I don't know if we don't have a picture from that. And outside of Lahore is Anarkali's market.
Oh, interesting.
So she's definitely
the connections there.
Yeah.
And so the next picture is in India, and this you are giving a workshop, and these are masks.
Well, actually, in the last one as well, there's a workshop that I gave with the paper masks.
Oh, with the children.
With the children in Gargaria, a village outside of Shantiniketan. And that was really wonderful. I mean, here are these children. I brought two students from Shantiniketan with me, and they performed. And initially they were shy, and the girls weren't going to do it, but they all did, and it was really wonderful. And like a week later, I went back to the village with the woman I was renting a cottage from, who had a sari business, embroidery sari, and she hired women from the villages, and they were my masks. The kids' masks were around the village.
That's interesting.
Yeah, but then the next one is the ceramic mask workshop that I did, and there is this story that I would love to tell. They made the mask, the clay mask, because I did weld, and actually the Anarkali mask I welded there, but they didn't have equipment for me to work with the kids. But they had a good ceramic studio, and they fired the masks, and they all were unique. And I said, outside of the Kala Bhavan, there's an area where you can perform a concrete platform. It's informal with a gorgeous banyan tree. And that was our performance space, and I had them tell a story with their masks, saying it was their 100th birthday.
Oh, that's so interesting.
And I chose that because Indian people don't feel that they're going to live to be 100. And I have a whole thing. My grandfather lived to be 102, and my daughter and I do a whole thing about that. But this woman got up and she stretched out her arms and she said, "I love you all." And I thought about that. It was so beautiful. I mean, it just would run through my mind periodically. And 2 years later, I was back, and she had graduated, but I can't remember where she was from.
It's okay.
Far away.
Okay.
And I said, "I never forgot what you said." And she said, "I've thought about it many times."
And now I would say something different.
Yeah.
It's
and she
interesting.
said, "I would say life is precious and short, and we should relish every moment."
Interesting.
So that was equally magnificent.
Yes, it was.
So,
All right, so we have some other things that you've done. Now, you work with ceramics, so you also do these boxes.
right, I don't normally work. I've had some ceramic training, but I don't normally work with ceramics, but it just was right for that situation. But these are my secret future works, I call them, and they have messages inside that were given to me by people in the different countries. So the one on the left is Hopes and Sorrows. I made that in India in 92, 93 during my Fulbright. But I had the boxes, which are homeopathic boxes, and one had messages of hopes and the other sorrows.
Okay.
And the reason I had sorrows was because I was there during the Ayodhya crisis, when things were very, very difficult in India, almost at a standstill for times. And it seemed that India is a country of hopes and sorrows.
Right.
And the other one I made in Tanzania, and the words on them, people put messages in relating to the words. So the words were community and individuality. And in Swahili, there's no word for individuality. So I used to make them laugh. I said, we took the word for pleasure. I think it's called ridika.
Okay.
Because Americans think individuality is pleasure.
That's interesting.
But they were extremely individual. That they didn't have to think about it.
They didn't have a word for it. It was okay. Can we skip over to the grave of
Sure.
martyrs? Because I'd like you to tell that story. You have that mask
Right,
with you
I
also?
do. Right.
Yeah.
Well, this is my studio in Bangladesh, where I'm going to work again in February. And these were 3 masks that I'd started, and I think that the Brave of Martyrs was finished. That's sitting on there. And here is the mask, and it's a very simple tale. The title was given to me by a student, and I guess the story too. I have given my life so that you can be free. What have you done with your freedom? I have given my life. That's all there is to it.
Wow, it's just powerful. Very short, but very powerful.
Yeah, and I think it's an international story, not just a Bangladeshi story. I arrived in Bangladesh very close to the essentially Day of Martyrs, the anniversary of Bangladesh becoming a state, which was after a very difficult war against what was then West Pakistan to become free, and all the terrible things that happen in war.
Wow. So it's almost, you talked about being at the Holocaust at the anniversary. This has happened to you. This has happened to you often when you get there. It just seems to be.
When you go in the world, things are happening all the time, and
Yeah.
if you pay attention, you see it. And for some reason or other, maybe because when I was a little girl in that apartment house in Queens, and I'd get in an elevator with a Holocaust survivor, they didn't have to say anything to me. I could just see in their body the suffering that they endured.
This next mask, was this also done in Africa?
No, the Chitrangada was done in Bangladesh, and it's my third Chitrangada mask. The first time I told that story and developed it in Lucknow, India, and my friend Shefali Moitra told me the story, and I performed it ever since. And Chitrangada was a princess raised as a prince. So here's a woman from the Mahabharata, the oldest Indian epic that Peter Brook wasn't particularly interested in. It may be called a side story, but it's our story. It's one of the few women of the world who were named. I mean, the Bengali bride has no name.
Right. So this is a good story.
So it's one of my good stories. I went looking for good stories.
Yeah.
I didn't find that many.
Found 2, you said.
Yeah, I found 2 of many.
Yeah.
But, times have changed. There still are terrible stories, but there are more good stories now. There really are.
That's good. All right, let's move on, because you also do monoprints.
Right. I started printmaking, actually, when I did the series on the Holocaust in Germany.
Okay.
I was able to use a press there, and over time, I got my own press. I went to the Women's Studio Workshop for quite a while. At that time, it was the only place really a woman could go who wasn't famous. And I just would stay. I'd go to a B&B and stay for many days and do a lot of prints. So when I went to Bangladesh in '95, I knew I wanted to print. I mean, usually I went and welded, but now I was a printmaker.
Okay.
So I also print when I go. And on my current trip too, I've been invited at the Government Art College in Kolkata, and there's a print workshop in Bangladesh. I'm going to be doing some
And when
work
I
at.
saw you this year, you were going to Florida, and you were
Right, I'm a
working-
printmaker. I love to printmake there at Eckerd College in the sun, overlooking a lake.
And I'd just like to mention, because you had said, because you're sponsored for a lot of these things.
Yes.
And one of your main sponsors is...
Well, our government has actually helped me out often,
Okay.
and the United Methodist Women have been totally wonderful. They really, Peggy Billings, who was then the head of the United Methodist Women, and the World Division were enormous sponsors on my original trip. And they, I think somewhere along here, actually the next slide is Bosnia. They sent me to Bosnia a year after the war. It was 95, November '95. and I had November '95. I had had cancer that year, and so I was still recovering, and I went into a country that was recovering.
Right.
So, you know, I mean, I guess whatever happens in my personal life, in some way, I think that's how we are, you know. The world returns to us how we see the world.
Right.
So I went into a recovering country while I was still recovering.
Well, I think you mentioned something about your journey and your connection, your art and your connection and your journey and the people and your life. It's all...
Yeah, well, I had no idea that I was going to be a lifelong traveling artist. But I think, I said to you, well, you know, I really wasn't a happy child.
Mm-hmm.
And I just felt, you know, when I was going to escape,
Mm-hmm.
I had to make an adult life that had meaning to me. And when I found art at the age of 15, I just emailed my still friend, Adam Berkeley. He's in California. He was the boy next door. Mm-hmm. And he introduced me to the Museum of Modern Art. And that's how I decided to become an artist. He told me there was the Art Students League, and I went, and opera and jazz, and so he was from Poland. So he had been an émigré and an immigrant.
All right, so let's just let's go quickly through, because the next one is a Bosnian.
It's the portrait box.
It's not a mask; it's a box.
Right.
And then the next one is
the
from
Bosnian secret
box,
future work.
so people have the images. And then the next one. Well, I just want to skip out to the one where we show the outside and the inside of those portrait boxes, because that gives an idea. Not only do you paint the outside.
Right. Because it's actually, you can see how the work may look different, but the fact is that the theme continues. So it's the outer view and the inner view. The inner life, which the inside of the mask speaks of. So when you put the mask on, you don't see the outside. I mean, this mask on the inside has a lot of fear.
Right.
It has a lot of pain on the outside.
Right. Interesting.
So that when you work with the mask, you see both of those. And it's the same with the portrait box.
Okay.
People pose 2 hours. And when I finally get to the portrait box, after doing other drawings of them, the inner box, it's 2 hours. We've talked for 2 hours. So they're relaxed, have revealed a lot. Right. And so the inside is
different than the outside.
Different from the outside.
That's the face we present to the world.
Right.
And your newest thing is paintings?
Well, I am painting. I'm painting and printmaking essentially now. Although I'm going to be welding in Bangladesh and Calcutta again. Well, in that environment, it's very inspiring. And you're also teaching, and you're also modeling, you know, still in those countries what a woman can do. But these are 2 recent paintings. I did them last year. And it's just interesting what comes up. The woman, bird woman, the second one, you know, there's an ancient bird goddess where they'd have a figure of a woman with the head of a bird. Mm-hmm. So this is a play on that. And then the other one has a magic realism quality. Okay. So, you know, the wonderful thing, I think it was Matisse who said, when you don't know what you're doing, you're doing something good. I think I told you that recently.
We're going to end with this last image of you. This is a sculpture, is it?
I'm sitting on my throne that I did at Art Park.
So behind you are your sculptures, are they?
And I'm holding my Spirit of Hope secret future work.
Okay.
And that's a piece that's still accepting messages.
Okay. Well, I'm so in awe of your passion and your message and your work, and I'm so happy that you've come here today to tell us the story. And thank you. Thank you.
Well, I guess it's driven. Thank you, Gigi.
Wonderful.
Thank you very much.
And thank you for watching.